Did I get Mom's ticket? Of course not.
I was trying to check in at the airport, but my ticket wasn't issued. My daughter-in-law had handled the tickets this time, so when my son checked with her, the response was unbelievable. My only son was getting married in Hawaii, and I was so excited heading to the airport, but I never expected this kind of treatment. Ever since my son first brought her home, my daughter-in-law's attitude toward me had been prickly. I tried not to let it bother me, but this was too much.
I thought she hated me and wouldn't want to come.
She said it so casually.
What are you talking about? She's my mother. Of course, she's coming.
My son's voice grew harsh.
Don't raise your voice. I'm feeling sleepy because of jet lag.
My daughter-in-law, who had arrived earlier, replied nonchalantly. I couldn't stand it anymore and asked my son to hand me the phone. Hello, what's going on?
Oh, Angie? Like I said earlier, but did you plan on attending our wedding? Seriously, you're such a carefree freeloader. It's hilarious how shameless you are.
I could picture Julie smirking smugly on the other end of the phone.
If you want to come, why don't you swim over? And of course, there's no hotel room for you, so you'll probably have to sleep outside.
Ha! With all the family and relatives there, I'm the only one not invited to the wedding. Even I had reached my limit with this. It seems Julie doesn't understand her position. I see, got it. It looks like I need to teach Julie a lesson about the harsh realities of life. My name is Angie Dickinson. I'm a 55-year-old housewife. Since I'm good with my hands, my hobbies include gardening and handicrafts at home. I'm good at embroidery and knitting, and sometimes I even hold small classes at home when people ask me to teach them. Recently, I've also gotten into baking, and my family raves about my cream puffs and chiffon cakes. I've lived a modest life, finding my own joys. But I used to be quite the career woman back in the day. After graduating from a local university, I was fortunate enough to land a job at a major construction company. My meticulous work and efficiency earned me a good reputation, and after 2 years in HR, I became an executive secretary. Back then, my husband, Arthur, who is 3 years older than me, worked in the design department of the same company. We interacted frequently because of my role in passing on information from the executives, and I developed a liking for Arthur's diligent work ethic and high aspirations. Arthur seemed to feel the same way about me, and our relationship quickly deepened after a company trip where we were seated next to each other on the bus. Arthur said I was like out of his league. I did get invited to meals by many men, but none of them really caught my interest. I thought Arthur already had a girlfriend since he was quite popular among the female employees. No, not at all. If you don't mind, would you like to hang out sometime? He asked, inviting me out. As we talked, we discovered we both enjoyed action movies and hiking, which helped us grow closer.
I'm thinking about going here next time.
Arthur would decide our next destination, and I would research and prepare for the trip. No matter how tough the trail was, the breathtaking view at the top always moved me. We climbed many mountains across the country together. Just like our hiking, our relationship progressed smoothly, leading to our marriage. After getting married, I loved my job so much that I was torn about continuing it, but after discussing with Arthur, I decided to focus on our home. A year after our wedding, our son, Ryan, was born. I manage household chores and childcare perfectly, and also advised Arthur on his work. Arthur said that talking to me sparked his work imagination. Being able to support Arthur in this way was my joy. People around us praised my role as a supportive wife, and Arthur's career thrived without neglecting our family. Despite his busy schedule, Arthur made time for family and took us on trips. He often played with Ryan, too. Growing up seeing his hard-working and family-oriented father, Ryan respected Arthur and aimed to be like him, eventually attending a good university and joining the same company as his father. Ryan, who is eager to become independent and is absorbed in his work, is just like his father in his younger days. Ryan has now turned 30 and is at an age where he is thinking about marriage. He's kind but somewhat shy with women, and I've hardly ever heard any frivolous stories about him. Just when I was starting to worry as a parent, it turns out a daughter of one of my husband's acquaintances took a liking to Ryan, and they started dating.
She's a woman working in the office at one of our clients. We haven't been dating long, but we're both at that age.
Ryan, who believes in dating with the intention of marriage, is serious like his father. I was surprised to hear this, but as a parent, I was happy that Ryan had found someone. So they decided to get married, and he was going to introduce her to us. Apparently, she's the daughter of a company president and got her job through her parents' connections, working in accounting. How old is she? What's her personality like? How does she look? How did they meet? I held back my curiosity and awaited the day. I had been preparing food since last night. I even washed the curtains in the living room. I watered the flowers at the entrance. I wonder what kind of person Ryan's future wife is. Seeing me fidgeting since morning, my husband smiled gently.
I'm meeting her for the first time too, but I know her father well from work. He said to take care of his daughter. He did mention she's a bit of a spitfire, but since Ryan is quiet, a lively partner might be just right for him.
Yes, it would be nice if she could take the lead and bring out the best in Ryan. As we imagine different scenarios together. Ding dong. The doorbell rang.
Hello, I'm Julie Bowen.
Julie greeted us cheerfully. She had a modern look with stylish makeup. Her long, brown-dyed hair swayed as she wore a slightly short dress and carried an expensive-looking designer bag slung over her shoulder, with Ryan holding her luggage. Well, welcome, beautiful young lady. It must have been a long trip for you, right?
Come in quickly and make yourself comfortable.
Both my husband and I were overjoyed.
Dad, Mom, thanks for the welcome.
Ryan looked a little embarrassed. Julie gave a greeting behind and entered the house. My husband and Ryan carried the luggage into the living room first. I approached Julie, who was taking off her shoes at the entrance, to speak to her. Julie, today.
You're too forward.
Julie muttered under her breath. I was taken aback.
Angie, you're a stay-at-home mom, right? Just a lazy bum leeching off the house. My shoes are expensive, so make sure to put them together properly. Ugh. So annoying.
She said this while kicking off her shoes carelessly and walking away, rudely cutting me off. What a rude thing to say. I was annoyed by Julie's disrespectful words, but in front of Arthur and Ryan, she was bright and charming.
When Ryan first came to our company for work, I fell in love at first sight and made a move. His looks are totally my type, and he's so kind, truly the best husband.
Seeing her talk so boldly, Ryan scratched his head shyly. It seems that Julie was the one who aggressively pursued the relationship. I didn't like Julie's attitude earlier, but since Ryan seemed to care for her, I thought maybe she was just nervous and decided to let it go. Moreover, my husband seemed very happy, saying, "He's a bit unreliable, but please take care of him," and drank more than usual, becoming very talkative.
Dad, don't treat me like a kid forever.
Ryan, also drinking, had a flushed face.
Oh, sorry.
My husband laughed in high spirits. The meeting proceeded harmoniously, with Arthur and Ryan looking satisfied. Afterward, Arthur hurriedly offered Julie some macarons as dessert.
Wow, this is delicious. Where did you buy them?
Taking a bite, Julie's eyes widened in surprise.
My mom made them.
Ryan answered, happily munching on his favorite macarons.
Oh, really?
Julie's tone suddenly dropped.
Since you have plenty of free time, it's only natural you can make something like this.
She showed no further interest.
By the way, the sweets I had at the Beverly Hills Hotel recently were exquisite. I want to go there with you, Ryan.
Okay. Let's go together.
Ryan hastily tried to please this demanding girl, but a sense of unease grew within me. Julie then made a bold request.
By the way, I prefer meat to fish, so from now on, please make meat dishes.
She didn't bother to clear the dishes or even say thank you. Does she think I'm just a servant? With her high pride and condescending attitude towards me as a stay-at-home mom, I wondered if I could get along with her. Will I be able to get along with this girl? My head felt heavy all of a sudden. What does Ryan see in her that he wants to marry her? Well, there must be something good about her. After they left, I was left with a feeling of unease. I shook my head to dispel my feelings. Despite my discomfort with Julie's attitude and my doubts about the marriage, I decided to trust Ryan's choice. Ryan continued to bring Julie over for meals.
Meat again. I'm tired of it. I want fish. And could you make the seasoning a bit lighter?
Julie had no hesitation in complaining about the food, even though she had insisted on having meat. She only ate and never showed any sign of helping out. One time she said, "Angie, you're good at sewing, right? I hate this patchwork, it looks so tacky. Can you hem these pants for me? And do my friends too?" She shamelessly pushed her tasks onto me. I thought I should try to get along with her, so I reached out. "Julie, how about we cook together next time?" Her response was immediate.
Don't joke around. Why should I have to cook? If you're trying to boss me around, I'll tell my dad.
Julie snapped back, still as arrogant as ever. However, Ryan began to notice her behavior.
Julie, you shouldn't talk to Mom like that.
Ryan tried to correct her.
What? I'm the one being mistreated here. It's awful. Ryan, you always side with your mom.
She turned away, pouting. Another time, she declared in front of Arthur, "Even if we get married, there's no way I'm living with you. Take care of yourselves. I can't handle taking care of old people." She was rude even to my husband, so I gently admonished her. "We're not planning on living together, but you don't have to be so distant."
Married or not, we're still strangers. Don't rely on us.
Julie cut me off sharply. Ryan tried to mediate, but she always had an excuse, ultimately threatening to tell her dad. I whispered to Ryan to avoid getting involved, as it would only complicate things. I worried that if Julie and I didn't get along, it would make things hard for Ryan. I was exhausted by Julie's arrogant attitude, but I endured it. Despite this, the wedding plans moved forward, and the day for both families to meet arrived.
Please be nice to our naive daughter.
Julie's father, who was deeply tanned, likely from golf, laughed heartily.
Please don't be too hard on her. She's sensitive.
Julie's mother spoke in a sweet, childlike voice, despite her age. Julie's father soon started talking about business rather than the wedding. Julie and her mother requested that the bride's side handle the wedding plans, since the bride is the main focus. I agreed, thinking the wedding should be for the bride. Julie chose to have the wedding in Hawaii. She dreamed of a garden chapel with an ocean view under a clear blue sky, and strongly insisted on it. We planned a 10-day trip, inviting only close relatives. Since Ryan often worked late, Julie handled most of the preparations. "It's a once-in-a-lifetime event, so it's okay to splurge, right?" she said, choosing everything beyond the budget. That was typical of Julie. She picked a high-end hotel, a high-brand wedding dress, and even rented a limo. She was also eager to book hotels and plane tickets for the guests herself. I love Hawaii, so I was thrilled to see Ryan getting married there. I excitedly shared the news about the wedding in Hawaii with my friends. My friends all congratulated me in unison. I wondered what souvenirs I should bring back. On the day of departure, we went to the airport where Ryan, who had arrived early, was cheerfully waiting for everyone.
Thank you all for coming. Let's have a fun trip together.
Then Ryan started handing out the tickets that Julie had given him. When it was my turn, I opened the envelope with my name on it, but it was empty. My ticket was missing. I couldn't believe it. Ryan noticed my shock.
I'll ask Julie. It must be a mistake.
He quickly called Julie. Julie, who had gone ahead with her parents, answered the phone.
Hello? Oh, no mistake. I thought she wouldn't come because she hates me. So I didn't get her a ticket.
Julie said nonchalantly.
What are you talking about? She's my mother.
Ryan's voice grew tense.
Don't raise your voice. I'm tired because of jet lag.
Julie's carefree voice came through. I couldn't stand it anymore. Let me talk to Julie. Hello, it's me. What's going on?
Oh, Angie? Just like I said. Were you planning to attend our wedding? It's hilarious how shameless you are, just like a lazy bum.
I could picture Julie smirking on the other end of the line.
If you want to come, why don't you swim over? And of course, there's no hotel room for you, so you'll have to sleep outside.
Ha!
Julie laughed loudly. It's humiliating and disgraceful to be the only one not invited to the wedding with all the relatives there. I felt unbearable. Why do I have to endure this? Anger surged within me, and my body trembled with rage. I finally snapped. I want to bless Ryan's marriage, but I can't tolerate Julie's attitude. I won't go to Hawaii. I decided not to attend and told Ryan.
I'm sorry, Mom. If you're not going, then I'm not going either.
Ryan apologized with a sad expression. He called Julie again.
If you can't treat my mother well, then I can't marry you.
He spoke firmly.
What? This has nothing to do with Angie. Why are you calling it off now? I've told all my friends about the wedding, and now I'll be embarrassed. This is terrible.
Julie screamed hysterically, but Ryan hung up the phone.
I don't feel bad for Julie. She's been awful to you from the start. I knew, and yet it came to this. I'm truly sorry.
Ryan looked defeated. My usually calm husband, who had quietly watched the situation unfold, was furious at Julie's harassment towards me. My husband said he would talk to Julie's father again. A week later, I got a call from Julie.
It's all your fault. I've had it.
Her shrill voice was full of complaints.
I'm going to charge you for the cancellation fees and damages. You old hag.
She screamed and abruptly hung up. Her rude attitude hadn't changed. Another week passed, and I got another call from Julie. When I answered, she suddenly started apologizing.
Angie, I was wrong. I'm really sorry.
She repeatedly apologized in a weak, almost inaudible voice. I see. I'm glad you realized your mistake. From your perspective, a carefree freeloader like me must be annoying. I responded calmly.
No, not at all. You're wonderful.
Julie no longer had her former bravado. I smirked, realizing she finally understood her position. Now I wouldn't have to deal with that spoiled woman anymore and could return to a peaceful life. Why had Julie suddenly changed her attitude? The truth is, my husband is the president of his company. Julie's father's company relies on my husband's company for 90% of their business. Although they are clients, they are essentially subcontractors for my husband's company. Julie's father wanted to maintain strong ties with my husband's company, but Julie ruined everything. When my husband told Julie's father about her mistreatment of me, he turned pale with rage and demanded that Julie apologize immediately.
You idiot. What have you done? Apologize to Angie.
What? Ryan's dad is the president? I didn't know that.
Julie called, almost in tears. After that, my husband decided to terminate business with Julie's father's company. Her father's company was already struggling. Hoping my husband would save them, but without the business, they went bankrupt. Julie was the daughter of his mistress. She hated me because I seemed to have a happy, normal life. Julie's father was notorious for his womanizing ways, often seducing female employees and clients. Julie's mother started as his mistress and ended up raising Julie alone after getting pregnant. She worked as a hostess to make ends meet, was irresponsible with money, and neglected household duties. She always envied the legitimate wife, had no interest in her children, and was starved for love. When the legitimate wife passed away, she became the second wife, but continued to waste money, always complaining about her hardships as a mistress, never trying to improve her situation. Julie hated me because I was the opposite of her mother, loved by my husband, and living a stable life. Looks can be deceiving, though. I can't help but feel that way. Even the closest families have problems they can't talk about. I've had my share of issues too. I gave up the job I loved to support my husband. I cooked every day to ensure my husband and Ryan stayed healthy. I also made sure to maintain good relationships with my husband's relatives and Ryan's friends' moms. I lived each day with gratitude for what I had. When problems arose, I worked hard to solve them one by one, which is why we are where we are today. I wish I could teach her that happiness isn't easily attained. Afterward, Julie's father blamed her for everything that went wrong and disowned her.
I don't need a useless daughter. She's dragging me down.
In reality, Julie's father himself lacked credibility in his work. Both of them had issues as people. Julie, as the daughter of the second wife, never received much love from her father. Julie's mother didn't care much about her either. I had a hard time as a mistress. Julie, you need to handle your own problems, she said, showing no intention of helping her disowned daughter.
Both dad and mom are the worst.
Julie lost her parental support and was kicked out, now living modestly as a temp worker. Her assigned department was the customer service center. She received endless complaint calls from customers every day.
The last operator was terrible.
She must have fueled the customers' anger. Complaints about things other than the products often came, and each time her boss scolded her, making it a rather ironic job.
Julie, how many times do I have to tell you to be polite and put yourself in the customer's shoes? At this rate, it'll be hard to renew your contract next time.
I'm sorry.
Hopefully, experiencing the harshness of society will make her change her ways. Meanwhile, Ryan has sworn off dating for now and is focusing on his work. I need to improve my judgment of people first, he said, realizing there's still much to learn. He's working hard every day, being trained by my husband, who is grooming him to be the next president. And I have started a new venture by opening a cafe. Both my husband and Ryan were very supportive. Being called a carefree freeloader by Julie motivated me to start something new. I had always wanted to do this and use the money I had saved up before getting married as startup capital. The handmade coasters with my embroidery and my chiffon cakes have received rave reviews, and now a magazine wants to feature my cafe. Since I couldn't run the cafe alone, I hired a young girl as an assistant. She's sweet and charming. She sometimes crosses paths with Ryan, and there seems to be a good vibe between them. My new beginning isn't bad at all.
After enduring terrible treatment from my husband George and his mother Susan, I decided to divorce George after 30 years of marriage. I can't live with you any longer. I want a divorce. Then George moved quickly. He called Susan, who lived nearby, and apparently told her about my intention to divorce. Susan joyously barged into our house, and they both smirked as they berated me.
Isn't the move done yet?
Get out fast.
Normally, it's impossible to move out immediately upon deciding to divorce, but they knew that. They just wanted a reason to mock me. I'll be gone in 30 minutes. But I wasn't going to just sit back and take it. Thank you. I appreciate your help for the move today.
Please, leave it to us. The rental car has also been arranged, so please come this way.
As I was about to get into the car, Susan followed me and looked surprised.
What's with this luxury car?
I was about to leave them behind for good. They can panic and regret it all they want. My name is Emily, and I'm 50 years old. I got married to my husband George in my 20s, and we were blessed with a son, Jacob. At that time, George asked me to quit my job to focus on housework and child rearing, so I resigned, though it was with regret. I raised Jacob with love, but during that time, George began to grow cold, casting a shadow over my life. Back then, I just endured their unreasonable treatment and tried to get through each day.
Hey, Emily, the entryway is dirty. You're a stay-at-home mom now, so at least take care of the house properly.
I'm sorry. I'll clean it right now.
Really? You can't do anything right. What good is a college degree if it's useless?
Since I became a housewife, Susan started coming over to our house every day. Each time, she would find something to complain about, raising her voice and blaming me. She had always been critical of the fact that I graduated from college.
Even though you graduated from college, you can't do anything.
But lately, these complaints have become even more frequent. However, she doesn't help. She just complains.
Once you're done here, could you clean in front of my house too? You really can't take a hint, can you?
Instead, she tries to burden me with the housework at her place too, since we live close by. She often catches me going shopping and imposes her own shopping on me. Of course, I don't get paid.
Oh my, Jacob, you're so cute.
When she comes over, all she does is sporadically dote on Jacob. And that's all she does. She doesn't take on anything challenging. She just shows affection, and everything else is thrown my way.
Hey, he's crying. Poor thing. Hurry up and calm him down.
Yes, I'll do it.
Really? It's terrible for a parent to make a child cry.
Even though Susan has experience raising kids and knows they cry, it seems any reason is good enough to berate me. George doesn't help around the house either, and as soon as I quit my job, the burden fell entirely on me.
Emily, do you have time sometime? There's a place to drop off the kids. Maybe we could go to a cafe?
I'm sorry. I've been told not to go out except for housework.
Really? If you ever have a tough time, let me know. I'm here to talk. Well, maybe another time.
This lifestyle keeps me from syncing up with friends, and I gradually drift apart as I keep declining invitations.
Hey, Jacob, what should I do? I feel like I'm being left behind by the world.
Despite Jacob being adorable, it was other reasons that were building up my stress.
Hey, haven't you taken out the trash yet? It's dirty. Hurry up and do it.
Yes, I will.
Oh my God, you're so slow. Why did I end up with such a daughter-in-law?
Juggling housework while caring for Jacob, I inevitably ended up doing both tasks half-heartedly, and both George and Susan criticized me for it. When Jacob turned 3, I considered enrolling him in daycare so I could focus on housework during the day, but Susan opposed the idea.
Daycare? You're pulling him away from his parents. Don't slack off on parenting just because you're a stay-at-home mom.
Even though she finds fault with both my housekeeping and parenting, how dare she say that?
Susan, who even dumps her own tasks on me, seems to dislike it whenever something might make my life a little easier. George was never interested in parenting to begin with.
Do whatever you want.
When he realized it wouldn't cost money, he just dismissed it and refused to join any further discussions. I decided to try to convince Susan.
I think it's good for Jacob to practice socializing since he's an only child.
Being firm because it was true seemed to work. I managed to convince Susan, at least for the moment. However, feeling outsmarted, Susan looked displeased and started to snipe at me.
If that's what you think is best, fine. But pushing Jacob out like he's a nuisance, I would never do that.
Seeing Jacob making friends and playing happily gave me some peace of mind. Yet my life was still under Susan's watchful eye.
Just because Jacob isn't here doesn't mean you can slack off on the housework.
Susan came over every day to check on me. If I hadn't finished the housework before she arrived, she would get angry even if I was in the middle of it, saying, "This isn't done," or "You haven't completed this." I couldn't help but fear and despise her.
Hey! Dinner!
How was your day? I'll serve it now.
I'm tired. Hurry up.
All right.
George now neither helps with housework nor childcare. Instead, he just adds to my burden.
Hey, you served the same menu last week. Are you slacking on the housework?
No, I cook every day, so some repetition is bound to happen.
Are you talking back to me? Who do you think provides for you?
George's yelling, just like Susan's, echoes in my head. Even Jacob, who was playing quietly, started crying from the shock.
Don't make him cry at mealtime. You're not disciplining Jacob properly.
Is that how he treats his child? I can't believe I married this man.
While holding back my frustration, I desperately tried to soothe Jacob.
When you suddenly yell like that, anyone would get startled. Please talk a bit softer.
Are you saying it's my fault? Don't get cocky just because you're a stay-at-home mom. Without my money, you guys wouldn't be able to eat. Show some gratitude and respect.
George always talks about money. Moreover, he separated his salary from the household account. He gives me some money for living expenses each month, but it's clearly getting less each year. Considering the expenses Susan forces on me, it's nowhere near enough. Even when I explain the situation and say we're short on money, George is very reluctant to contribute more.
It's your negligence. You spend too much. You think you can do whatever you want with someone else's money.
Yet, he won't tell Susan to stop sending me on errands.
If only that would stop, things might be a bit better.
You can't say no, and that's your fault.
That's all George insists on. and he keeps blaming me. Surely he doesn't want to be seen as the bad guy. And he hates that his earned money is used by anyone but himself. I have a bad relationship with my parents and nowhere to return to. Considering Jacob and the expenses that are piling up, I couldn't afford a divorce. Carrying the burden of stress, I convinced myself to maintain this marriage for Jacob's sake. Even as Jacob grew older, the harassment-like treatment towards me from them continued. Susan constantly watched over me, criticized my shopping and housework, and George often came home without notice. Yet, when he does come home, it's always suddenly, and he flies into a rage if dinner isn't ready right away.
How many years have you been a housewife, and you still can't manage the housework properly? Get it together.
At least let me know if you need dinner. You don't come home some days. I can't have it ready instantly.
Don't talk back. That's your job. Who do you think earns the money here? You're just eating off my earnings. The least you could do is manage that.
Lately, George's arguments have gotten even worse. Jacob, having grown up, observed Susan and George with a very cold eye due to the treatment he received from a young age. He was kind to me, but clearly avoided them and rarely engaged in conversations with them. One day, with a serious expression, Jacob told me something shocking.
Mom, George is cheating.
What? When Susan and George were not around, Jacob referred to them as Susan or George respectively. Initially, I gently scolded him, but I soon gave up, as I could no longer see George as a husband or even Jacob's father.
The other day, while I was hanging out with friends, I saw him walking with a young woman. So we followed them for a few days and got plenty of evidence.
Jacob showed me the photos saved on his smartphone. There were pictures of George walking arm in arm with a woman around 30 years old, entering a movie theater, and going into a restaurant. There were also photos of them entering a hotel, leaving a hotel, and even kissing on the street. Thanks for telling me, but don't do this again. It's dangerous. So I decided to gather evidence on my own. However, being constantly monitored by Susan, I couldn't freely act. I hired a detective and left it to a professional. I had no love left for George, and Jacob was already grown up. While preparing for a divorce, I decided to gather evidence of George's infidelity. George, we need to talk. I confronted him once I had gathered enough evidence. Then George lashed out at me in anger.
So it's all my fault now, is it? It served you right to be cheated on. Do you think I can see a shabby old hag like you as a woman?
As expected, George wouldn't admit his faults. And then he said his usual line.
Who do you think has been paying for everything all this time? Don't get all high and mighty. You have nowhere else to go anyway. Know your place.
Are you serious? I've been subjected to terrible treatment all this time. I thought I had no love left for him, and even felt hatred, but I was surprised to find there was still something deeper. It's not just hatred. A disgust wells up, and George yelling in front of me starts to look utterly repulsive.
Serious? Of course, I am. If I said I wanted a divorce, you'd be lost without me. Better keep in line and stay on my good side if you don't want to be divorced.
Hearing George's words, the last thread of my patience snapped. I can't live with you any longer. I want a divorce.
What did you say?
Initially surprised, George quickly regained his composure. With a spiteful smirk, he looked down on me.
Fine. Do as you like.
Then George moved quickly. He called Susan, who lived nearby, and apparently told her about my intention to divorce. Susan joyously barged into our house, and they both smirked as they berated me.
So you're finally getting a divorce, right? A wife like you who can't do anything right is just in the way. It'll be refreshing to have you gone.
If you end up on the streets, don't blame us. Once we're divorced, you and I are strangers. Don't count on my money. I'm sick of seeing your miserable face. Just get out.
I looked at them with cold eyes and then began packing my things. Since the day I learned of George's infidelity, I had been slowly gathering my belongings so I could leave immediately.
Don't even think about seeing Jacob again. He's our grandson. He'll inherit our house and take care of us in our old age.
You should just live alone and lonely.
They laughed with mean-spirited voices. Looking back, my life has always been looked down upon by them. What joy do they get from attacking someone like this? I guess I'll never understand.
Isn't the move done yet?
Get out fast.
Normally, it's impossible to move out immediately upon deciding to divorce, but they knew that. They just wanted a reason to mock me. But I wasn't just going to take it silently anymore. I'll be gone in 30 minutes. Having been pushed this far, I couldn't let it go without fighting back. I was determined to get my revenge, including for everything up until now. I only have a few personal belongings left in this house. If I ever had a bit more stuff, George and Susan would get furious, so in the end, this made my move out much smoother. Still, it was a lot to move by myself, so I asked for transport help. When I called, 2 vehicles quickly came. Thank you. I appreciate your help for the move today.
Please, leave it to us. The rental car has also been arranged, so please come this way.
In addition to the vehicle for transporting my belongings, they arranged a separate car for me to ride in, which made the move very smooth. I had never used such a service before, but given how courteous it was, I would consider using it again. As I was about to get into the car, Susan followed me and looked surprised.
What? What's with this luxury car?
Hearing her scream-like voice, George hurriedly came out to the entrance.
What the heck? Hey, Emily, what is this? Explain.
Their faces red with anger. They looked anything but ordinary. They might be misunderstanding something. Since this might take a while, I asked the driver to wait. Then I turned back to the irrational two. What do you mean? I just called a car. It's obvious since I'm moving out and have luggage.
That's not what I mean. Why are you getting into such a luxury car? Where did you get the money? Don't tell me you stole it from us.
They barely give me any money. How would I steal it? I wish they'd be more realistic. Please don't say such terrible things. It's my own money. Encouraged by Jacob, I had been working as an online French tutor for about 10 years. Having majored in French in college, that background came in handy. I also did some interpreting and translation work, but the French classes were more successful than expected, and now I have my own company.
You earned it yourself? Don't be ridiculous. What kind of job can someone who doesn't leave the house have?
That's right. You must have stolen our money. You're always up to no good. Give it back now. Quickly.
Apparently, they couldn't quite grasp the concept of online work. They might be severely outdated, but perhaps that's to be expected. It's a field they'll never be involved with, so they never had the knowledge. Susan, jumping to conclusions and forcing her own sense of what's normal, tried to grab at me. George, his face red with anger, was yelling and seemed on the verge of stomping his feet in a tantrum. It would only be a matter of time before he joined Susan in physically confronting me. As the hired car driver looked on bewildered, Jacob got out of the back seat and raised his voice.
What my mom is saying is true. I introduced her to a job that turned out to be a great success, and now she's even wealthier than Dad. As her son, I'm really proud.
Susan was surprised by Jacob's unexpected appearance. She stopped grabbing at me and turned towards Jacob.
Jacob, what do you mean? You're not just siding with this woman because she's your mother, are you?
George seemed unconvinced and decided that Jacob must be lying.
Don't lie, Jacob. You're just under Emily's bad influence. Get back inside the house right now.
Jacob showed no signs of being intimidated. As his parent, it's impressive how well he's grown up.
No, I won't be going inside. I'm not returning to that house. I'm leaving with Mom.
Jacob stated it clearly. Even after becoming an adult, Jacob had not been allowed to move out of our house. As Susan inadvertently revealed earlier, their intention was probably for him to take care of them in their old age. Jacob, who could have left whenever he wanted, had until now complied with Susan and George. He stayed in this oppressive house with me because he was worried about leaving me alone. But now, he no longer needs to. With me moving out, Jacob, who stayed in the house for my sake, can now be free.
What are you saying? After all we've done raising you, how can you say such a thing?
That's right, Jacob. Apologize.
The one who raised me is my mom. It definitely wasn't you two.
Until now, Jacob had been quiet, but he firmly counted. Perhaps it was an unexpected turn of events, as Susan's face turned pale.
How dare you say something so terrible?
You only went to college because of me. What an awful way to talk.
Jacob looked at George with a very cold gaze.
It's always about money with you, Dad. And actually, that money has been coming from Mom for a while now.
What did you say?
George turned his gaze to me. You always say, "Who do you think you're living off of?" So I figured you'd start saying it to Jacob too, and that just made me sick. When my job started to take off, I decided I'd pay for all of Jacob's education costs. You didn't even notice. I'm also covering the shortfall in living expenses with my earnings. He really doesn't seem to notice, so I can't help but sigh deeply. Jacob seemed just as dismayed, his face expressing utter disbelief.
From kindergarten through college, you really think it costs the same? You just transferred enough for living expenses and let Mom cover the rest. Really, I wish I wasn't related to you.
What kind of way is that to talk to me as your parents?
So far, Jacob had been calm, but now he glared at George with fiery eyes. And then he let out an incredibly low roar.
My only parent is my mom.
Jacob's sudden outburst startled George. He probably didn't expect to be challenged. Susan also seemed too frightened to speak. They're only bold when they think there will be no pushback. They can only attack those they perceive as weak. What petty and despicable people they are.
I only called you Dad and Grandma to keep mom from being the target of your frustrations. You two are really just strangers to me. A man who scrimps on money for the house just to torment mom, and a woman who sporadically dotes on me and then acts all martyred as if she's my mother.
George and Susan were silenced by Jacob's piercing gaze. This is the first time I, as his mother, have seen Jacob so angry.
Acting like a mother, but only when you feel like doting. I don't remember you ever really taking care of me. Being taken out by you has been a pain since I was little, because you just impose your opinions and convenience on me. I'm not some accessory for you to show off.
Susan, stared down by Jacob, let out a small scream. Susan would only take Jacob from me when she felt like it, and act like a good grandmother in public places. It's been this way since Jacob was little. She would say she's buying him toys and then give him a cheap balloon, getting angry if he didn't play with it.
Emily has been harassing me, taking away the toys I bought for Jacob.
And so, Susan would shout as if she were the victim. When Jacob was in high school, she would take him out to buy clothes, choosing ones that didn't suit his taste at all. And when he wouldn't wear them, she got angry at me.
And then you'd badmouth mom right in front of me. To me, you've always been the bad guy making mom cry since I was little. Take over the house, take care of us in our old age. I don't care about that stuff.
Jacob spoke dismissively, and Susan seemed about to say something. But as soon as Jacob glared at her, she shrank back. George then cautiously tried to counter, despite seeming afraid.
How can you be so ungrateful? I didn't raise you to be like this.
What? Ungrateful?
Jacob scoffed at George's words.
I don't owe you anything. In fact, when I was a child and fell ill, it was mom who stayed by my side the entire time. That woman over there just came in, whimsically shoved an apple in my mouth, and then left satisfied without even checking my fever or caring about the hospital or medicine.
Susan, pointed out, shrank back and mumbled some excuse that I couldn't hear well. Jacob probably couldn't hear her either. She probably wasn't even forming coherent words. After all, she couldn't rebut because what Jacob said was the truth.
As for that man, has he ever cared about me even once? You don't know anything about me. You only interfered loudly with which college and department I should attend. That's it. You never cared about where I worked. Elementary school, middle school, high school, you only cared about my grades, and even then, only as a reason to scold mom if I wasn't first. It was obvious you weren't really interested.
Anger was evident in Jacob's eyes. Faced with his gaze, George and Susan were trembling. They had only ever berated me, someone they thought wouldn't fight back. This might be the first time they faced open anger from someone like Jacob. They're reaping the consequences of their petty lives. Still, I don't want to see Jacob consumed by anger. I approached him and gently tapped his shoulder. Calm down a bit. My touch seemed to remind him of his better self. He took a deep breath and managed to control his heightened emotions. Well, that's the situation, so Jacob and I are leaving home together. He's even managing a French language school now, and we'll be fine, just the two of us. George glanced at the hired car I had called. He then realized that what Jacob and I were saying was true. Then his demeanor suddenly changed, and he approached me with a fawning smile.
Wait, can't you reconsider? I was wrong, divorce. That's no way.
What are you saying now? You already have a lover. Just be happy with that person. The one who was most shocked by my words was Susan.
A lover? What do you mean, George?
Caught off guard, George frantically looked back and forth between Susan and me. Then he started to make a desperate excuse.
No, it's not true. Emily is lying.
Are you really going to play dumb? We have plenty of evidence, like text messages and photos. You can't talk your way out of this.
Jacob presented the evidence he and the detective I hired had gathered. They were all neatly organized into photos. Of course, they were copies, so it was pointless for George to try to deny it now. I looked at the sweating George coldly. Your girlfriend, Mary, right? She's quite beautiful and young. I've also been in contact with her husband. Both he and I plan to file for damages, so good luck.
Damages?
George's face turned even paler. Seeing him turn from flushed to ghostly white gave me some satisfaction. Jacob, remaining calm, confronted the panicked George with the reality.
You disregarded Mom and went after a married woman. It's only natural, or did you not think at all?
Contempt was clear in Jacob's eyes. I was almost impressed. It was because I thought I couldn't despise George any more than I already did, yet he still managed to disappoint me further. Who could have predicted he'd manage to disappoint beyond all expectations? George, you've been living it up ever since I stopped asking for household expenses. You spend most of your salary as soon as you get it, don't you? The money you contribute to the household has been steadily decreasing. Did he really think I was frugally managing the household just because of his scoldings? His uncontrolled spending had eroded both his financial sense and his reason.
It's unbelievable that you didn't realize Mom was covering almost all the household expenses.
There's no money in the household account. Every month, I deposited the necessary amount, which then got used up.
George, what's going on? Damages. How much money is left?
Susan rushed over to George, demanding answers. The fact that the first thing Susan asked her cheating son George about was money was so fittingly shallow for her. Feeling cornered, George frowned uncomfortably and then roughly brushed off Susan's hand.
Shut up. It's fine. I have my retirement money, and it's not like there's nothing left.
Let's hope that's enough to cover the damages. I don't know how much is left in George's salary account, but judging by his lavish spending with Mary, it can't be much. My words seemed to perfectly capture George's anxiety. George, who had been cowering, now glared at me with eyes full of hatred. I exaggeratedly shrugged. Oh, scary. Even if you glare at me, you'll still have to pay the damages, and no extra money is going to appear. If he had managed his finances properly, this wouldn't be happening. If he hadn't cheated, the damages might have been more manageable. Actually, since you didn't give me the household money, I plan to add that amount to the damages, so get ready. I've kept thorough records since I started covering nearly all the household expenses. Once I started making a steady income, I consulted a lawyer about our household issues and prepared everything properly. Unlike George, who spent without thinking. When Susan realized George had no money, she immediately turned to us with a fawning smile. Unlike George's ingratiating behavior towards me, she approached Jacob with a wheedling tone.
Wait, Jacob. Are you really leaving? Are you going to abandon me? Please think of me and help me.
Her tearful and pathetic act was laughable. Despite hearing Jacob's words, how can she think he would help her? Doesn't she realize he probably hates her and doesn't harbor any positive feelings? Surely, she can do something so shameless because she believes the world revolves around her. It's an incredibly convenient way of thinking. It's nothing short of pathetic. Jacob glared at Susan with loathing.
You always got in the way whenever I tried to go to Mom, ever since I was in kindergarten.
Susan's expression froze. She seemed to be scrambling for an excuse, but Jacob didn't give her a chance to speak, continuing with cold eyes.
And you always said things like, Jacob, it's a shame your mom can't cook, or Jacob, you got sick because your mom can't clean. You always badmouth Mom to make me hate her.
Hearing Jacob's words brought back my own memories. Susan would always say these things loudly, making sure I could hear. I already thought she was an unpleasant person, but having her actions exposed by Jacob left her expression frozen. She never considered how her treatment of me and her pitying of Jacob would make us feel. She only cared about her own satisfaction. That's the kind of selfish person she is.
I'm not someone you need to take a pity on, and Mom is great at cooking and cleaning. She always worked hard. You made Mom do even your own housework while you did nothing. If you say I abandoned you, I did it the moment you started badmouthing Mom to me.
Hearing Jacob's clear declaration of disdain, Susan collapsed to the ground. George, who had always catered to Susan, was still muttering about his money. In the end, self-centered people like them can only see their own needs. Jacob and I got into the hired car, leaving them behind. That's how it is, so make sure you pay the damages, and don't ever contact us again. There was no response from them. As the car drove away, I didn't look back even once, leaving behind the place where I had endured so many years of suffering. George was also sued for damages by Mary's husband, losing a substantial amount of money. I received the damages from Mary as well, which was a relief. I heard that Mary also got divorced. Unlike us, they didn't have children, which is a small mercy. I've also heard that Susan's health deteriorated after that incident. She hardly goes out anymore and is mostly bedridden during the day. Originally someone who loved to assert dominance over others, she now forces herself to go out on her good days, only to badmouth Jacob and me. People around her have become fed up and are gradually distancing themselves. Recently, even George has become fed up with dealing with her, which indicates just how bad things have gotten. Eventually, she'll have no one left to complain to. I hope she spends her remaining years in solitude. George and Mary worked at the same company, and both are now dealing with significant social stigma. When Mary found out George had no money, she quickly left him and also quit her job to work elsewhere. Without savings, George will have to continue working, feeling out of place for the rest of his life. Susan, his only remaining family, constantly complains, and as an old man with no money, George will likely find that no one wants to associate with him. He, too, is destined for a lonely life. I'm looking forward to seeing which of us ends up in a worse situation. I moved into an apartment with Jacob. I considered buying a house, but since Jacob would soon be on his own, an apartment seemed more convenient.
Mom, there's someone I want you to meet.
Well, does that mean? 6 months after the divorce, Jacob introduced me to his girlfriend.
Let me introduce you. This is Jessica.
Nice to meet you. I'm so glad to finally meet you. I hope we can get along well.
Jessica was a very kind and lovely girl.
Mom, you've been through a lot, so I want you to be as happy as possible from now on.
I'm so glad you're such a kind person. I'm a bit clumsy, but I really respect you, Emily. Please teach me many things.
With tears in my eyes, I nodded at their words. It felt like all the hardships I endured were being replaced by happiness. I'm sure that from now on, my life will be filled with smiles.
I'll be happy instead of Sarah. I'll take over your wedding.
Sorry, I don't quite understand what you mean. My best friend, who mocked me for being a plain woman, robbed my fiancé and even tried to steal my wedding? But my best friend turns pale at my word. And who might you be? My name is Sarah. I am the bride-to-be, with my long-dreamed wedding just around the corner. I always wanted to get married in my 20s during my student days, but I realized in my early 20s that finding a life partner was not easy. It was extremely busy to search for love while continuing my career, but finally, I met my soulmate. Now, I am on top of the world. Today, I have a reunion with a high school friend after a long time.
Sorry to keep you waiting. It's been a while. How have you been?
I've been good. It's nice to see you. You look well, Karen. Karen, whom I haven't seen for about a year, is still beautiful.
Sarah, you rushed over, didn't you? Your hair is a mess.
Karen said with a laugh as she fixed my hair. She's always been kind, covering for me whenever I slipped up. Karen, you're still as beautiful as ever. You are the most beautiful woman.
Haha, you too, Sarah. How's work going?
Karen is an editor for a fashion magazine, a glamorous job. I, on the other hand, work in office administration for a small company. I am leaving the company soon to get married. Actually, I'm getting married.
What, Sarah, you had someone?
Her reaction was unexpected, but not surprising, since we never talked about love life before. It's the first time we're talking about this, but yay, I've been dating someone for a year.
Really? You should have told me. What's he like?
Karen, while pouting, was very interested in my fiancé. He's too good for me, really kind, and being with him makes me very happy. One reason I never talked about my love life with Karen is she seemed uninterested in others' romance. Even now, she looked out the window, seemingly bored, despite having asked.
Well, but you know, a guy who's just nice won't cut it. He needs to be able to work well. Are you going to continue working?
I'm quitting at the end of this month. He wants me to stop full-time work. Karen suddenly leaned in as I said that.
What? That's so selfish. Are you sure? Does this guy have the means to support you both? You realize living together costs twice as much, right?
I mentioned that my fiancé owns an apartment and that we would live there after getting married because she seemed worried. He's a young executive at a major company. It's safe to say he's financially reliable. I've never been much into my job. When he suggested me to be a stay-at-home maker, I was secretly thrilled. Explaining everything made Karen look even more disinterested and said, "What's that, bragging? I'm feeling down. Let's call it a day," and suddenly stood up to leave. Left behind, all I could do was watch Karen's retreating figure in a daze.
Welcome back. You went out with your friend, right? Did you have fun?
When I got home, my fiancé, David, had already returned. Noticing my downcast face, he peered worriedly at me. What happened? It seems I accidentally upset my friend without realizing it. David made coffee, and as I explained the situation, he said, "Maybe this girl, Karen, is just jealous of you, Sarah." That would be the natural conclusion, but Karen is much prettier by far.
I wonder, do friends really get seriously jealous over love stories? I don't want to speak ill of your friend, but I don't have the best impression of her. Normally, people are happy to hear about their friends' good news, especially if it's about something joyful.
I was torn between agreeing with David and not wanting to believe it. "I'll see her one more time." David said kindly, "That's good. And if something unpleasant happens, come and talk to me. I'm on your side, Sarah." I love this about him. If I can't reconcile with Karen, then next time we meet, I'll have to end this relationship. I can't keep up with someone who speaks ill of my dear one. Deciding this, I sent Karen a message to arrange our next meeting.
Sorry I was late. I apologize for leaving early last time.
A week later, Karen immediately apologized for the previous day's incident when we saw again. "No, I'm sorry too for being late and talking about things."
Sarah, it's not your fault. I was feeling a bit unwell that day and wanted to go home. I'm really sorry.
Relieved that we reconciled, I let out a sigh of relief.
Tell me about your husband, Sarah. He's kind, isn't he?
Yes, he secretly booked the wedding venue I've always dreamt of. I was so moved I cried. Karen exaggeratedly cheered. Wow. We got excited talking about cliched things like wedding dates and rings.
Hey, is he handsome? Show me his picture.
Karen asked with a grin. Well, he's a bit older, but I think he's handsome. He's tall too. Do I have a picture? Realizing I hadn't taken many photos, I scrolled through my phone's camera roll, which was full of food pictures and no people. Well, oh, he was interviewed in a magazine once. Maybe there's an article online. David contacted me as soon as I tried to search. Oh, sorry. I need to take this call.
Sure, take your time.
Karen said as I stepped outside to talk to David, who had left work early feeling unwell. Sorry, Karen. My boyfriend is feeling a bit sick. I feel terrible, but can I go home now?
Of course, don't worry about it. Go take care of him.
Karen said with a smile, sending me off. I never got to show her his picture. Well, I'll introduce him eventually. For now, I need to focus on David waiting at home. Though I was worried when he called, David just had a cold onset and recovered after a couple of days. I sent an apology message to Karen soon after, but she hasn't replied yet. I'm a bit concerned, but she's probably just busy with work. I have a wedding meeting coming up this weekend. There's so much to decide before then. Life's milestones are hectic. Eventually, I forgot about the lack of response from Karen. And on the weekend, as soon as we arrived at the venue, the planner approached us with a worried look. There was a message that the wedding and guests remain the same, but the bride has changed. Such harassment happens rarely, but they managed to handle it, concerned something had happened to me. The person didn't give a name, just mentioned she would be the new bride. After discussing precautions for future pranks, we finished planning the ceremony details by midday. Having lunch at a cafe, David looked at me worriedly.
Sarah, be careful for a while. The prankster might be someone close to us.
Okay, I understand. And you take care too, David. You've just recovered from your cold. David gave a wry smile and said, I'll be careful. I was a bit worried about our upcoming wedding, but at that time, it seemed like no big deal. I was busy with preparations, like sending out invitations, but recently, David has been coming home late. I tried to talk to him whenever he was free because we had decisions to make together, but he seemed too tired to respond much. Is this what they call prenuptial doubts? Maybe I should take a break. Just then, I saw a message from Karen on my phone. And now, what perfect timing. She asked if we could see, so I immediately replied, sure, and started getting ready.
Hi, Sarah. Long time no see. Sorry, all of a sudden. I was nearby and thought maybe we could grab some tea.
I've been wanting to see you too. I've been so busy. I really needed a break. Thanks for asking. She sighed, phew, and took a sip of her tea. Karen looked at me and said,
You seem tired. If you want, I'm here to talk.
I hesitated to vent about wedding stuff, thinking it might come off as bragging, then said, Well, David has been busy lately.
Ahaha, is that so?
I was about to say, I keep crossing paths with him, when suddenly Karen burst out laughing, startling me into silence.
I'm sorry, he's probably just really busy, right? Maybe you shouldn't nag him too much.
She said with a smirk, but I didn't recall being naggy with David. Yo, he seems tired, so I've been doing what I can on my own. But there are things we need to decide together.
Well, you want a nice wedding, right? But you know, there's a lifestyle that fits each of us. Are you going to keep nagging your husband and end up alone? Maybe you'd be better off in an apartment rather than a fancy condo. I mean, there's neighborhood interaction in condos, right? I'd be shocked if someone like you lived next to me in a luxurious condo. Like, wow, she's so plain.
I was overwhelmed by her words, but realized I was being mocked. That's horrible. Why would you say that?
Well, it's the truth. You've always been plain and unremarkable. And now that you've found someone and can lead a good life, you quit your job and boast about it.
I opened my mouth to argue back, but Karen looked annoyed.
Forget it. I have never thought of you as my friend since I was a student. I just hung out with you because it made me stand out. David would probably be happier with me than with someone as plain as you. Anyway, I'm leaving. Enjoy your life.
After Karen left, I was too stunned to move. Feeling like I'd been attacked. Too shocked to cry. I sensed she knew too much about David. Was his late return because he was meeting with Karen? The uneasy feeling lingered. I was scared to go home and face David. How long had I been sitting there? When the ring of my phone jolted me back to reality.
Sarah, where are you?
I blurted out, but hearing David's worried voice almost made me cry. Sorry, I'll be home soon. I was at the cafe with Karen.
I'll come and get you. It's dark outside. Stay there.
David said, sounding more caring than usual. I waited as he told me, and he ran to pick me up.
Sarah, what happened? Are you okay?
It's nothing. I think Karen doesn't like me anymore. I was so surprised. Time just flew by. Sorry for worrying you. David stroked my head and said,
I'm sorry for being so busy lately. I've wrapped up a big part of my work today. Let's go home and talk.
David led me home and I made a cup of hot coffee. I was colder than I realized. And David must have been too. Thanks for coming to get me, I finally said, having not yet thanked him for coming.
You sounded so down. I was worried. Can you tell me what happened with Karen?
I slowly recounted what Karen said, and David looked puzzled.
Karen, I haven't met her, have I?
No, I don't think so. Seeing David's baffled reaction made me feel silly for suspecting him of having an affair with Karen. Then David shared something I had completely forgotten about.
Actually, I didn't want to worry you, but prank calls to the venue have continued.
I was surprised both at myself for nearly forgetting and at the fact that the calls were still happening.
So, I'm thinking we should move the wedding up by a week.
Due to the frequent calls, the venue suggested rescheduling. They would handle it as a new booking, so the prankster wouldn't know and couldn't cause any more trouble. Apparently, the caller had been giving detailed instructions for the guests and the ceremony, which the venue couldn't keep up with.
The paperwork is already done, and the invitations have been changed. I'm sorry for not consulting you. I've been coming home late because I've been trying to wrap up work early.
No, I appreciate that you were thinking of me. Thank you. David smiled warmly and said, "Of course." We spent the available time planning the wedding, and soon the day arrived. The ceremony at the venue we dreamed of was wonderful and memorable. I can truly say I'm happy to be married to David. After the wedding, we left for a 1-month honeymoon. Our honeymoon is our dream trip to Europe. One morning, about a week in, while we were enjoying breakfast in our hotel, the phone rang.
Sarah, your phone is ringing.
It's from Karen. Why is she calling? I hadn't contacted her since our fallout, wondering why she would reach out now. I answered it, feeling strong because I wasn't alone and not in the USA. "Hello, Bo, a video call?"
Hey Sarah, aren't you late?
On the screen, Karen appeared in a wedding dress.
It's not funny for the bride to be late. Or did you realize and run away? I'm all set here.
What is she talking about? I couldn't process fast enough to respond.
The dream venue, the dream wedding, and then living in a condo. You're getting what you deserve for living beyond your means, right? Well, I'll be happy in your place. It must hurt, but you can still come, you know.
Despite the hurtful words she seemed sure would affect me, I knew I had to clarify. Well, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not in the USA right now. I can't come there. Karen looked shocked.
Where are you? Why aren't you in the USA? Today is your wedding, right?
Actually, our wedding was last week, and now we're on our honeymoon in Europe. What are you doing, Karen? What do you mean by taking my place? It started to make sense. Maybe Karen was the one making the calls to the venue, intending to take over the wedding I was supposed to have. David, listening next to me, seemed to realize the same thing, watching the screen with a stern expression.
No, this makes no sense. You're on a honeymoon alone. Pretending to have a partner is just sad, especially when the groom is here.
Karen said, turning the camera to show a man beside her. I struggled for words but could only ask one thing. Well, who is he? Karen froze with a smile.
What? That's your guy, right? Have you lost your mind?
But the man was a stranger to me. What's going on here? I looked at David in confusion and he was staring at the screen with wide eyes.
John, what are you doing?
Oh, boss, good evening. Isn't today your wedding day?
Apparently, John and David know each other. David, with a look of realization, asked me to let him handle it. I quickly agreed, realizing I couldn't sort this out myself.
Hello, Karen. I'm David, Sarah's husband.
Just saying that turned Karen's face pale.
You mistook John for Sarah's husband by mistaking me for John. I don't know how you got that idea.
No, that's a lie. I saw the name on Sarah's phone. and I checked a photo from the magazine interview. You're engaged, right? That's what you said. You kept bothering me about it.
It seemed she had sneaked a look before but must not have seen clearly. She confused John for David, and the photo in the article as well. Even with David beside me, making it clear she was mistaken, she confronted John, blurting out incredulous things.
What? Engaged? You mean married, right? Yes, I have a wife.
What? Are you kidding, John? You're married.
Who's a crazy one here, trying to marry a married man?
Karen, it seems you were trying to trap Sarah, but John, whom you mistook for me, was fired for infidelity.
This time, I was the one surprised and turned to look at David. It turned out John was a former colleague at David's company who had been relocated after his affair was discovered a year ago and then forced to resign after repeating his misconduct. However, he himself wasn't convinced and became a nuisance, loitering around the company and bothering the employees. David gave Karen the final blow as she stared at John, unable to accept the wrong person.
John's wife is used to handling these situations. I think you can expect a formal notice for the evidence of infidelity.
Karen glared at John, then at us. David moved the phone to shield me from her stare.
It really annoys me that you alone get to be happy, being so plain compared to me.
Actually, Sarah is far better than you.
David retorted, making Karen furious.
A formal notice. I don't care about compensation.
Karen, I think your boss will be informed too.
Karen, who had remained defiant, finally turned pale. If the company is notified, everyone will know of the affair, leading possibly to demotion or forced resignation.
Please don't contact Sarah again. If you do, we will report it to the police. And don't even think about visiting.
This screen showed a chaotic scene. John trying to appease a fuming Karen in her wedding dress, who remained silent and downcast. Unbothered, David ended the call.
The wedding costs will probably fall on Karen since John can't afford it.
He remarked, checking my reaction. I probably won't see Karen again. I felt neither sadness nor pity for her. Thanks, David.
It's okay. What are we going to do today after this? Spend time at the hotel.
The bond with Karen had already been severed at the cafe. There was no need to ruin our honeymoon over someone who harbored malice against me. I decided to enjoy the rest of my honeymoon, along with my sweet husband who makes me happy.
I didn't mean to hurt you. Emily, please don't hate me.
The junior at my company who stole my fiancé said this without even apologizing. A year later, she came from another department to see me off when I was leaving the company.
It's been a year and you still have feelings for him, huh? Are you so shocked that you quit your job?
As the junior said this with a smirk, my colleagues burst out laughing. You didn't know why I was quitting. Embarrassed and angry, the junior's face turned red. My name is Emily. I work in sales at an IT company, hustling every day. I turned 31 this year, just an average employee. I've been working at this company for 5 years and have always been able to handle everything effortlessly. Even now, I'm still appreciated for being efficient at my job. I'm fairly popular among my colleagues and have managed my relationships well. And at this company, I met the love of my life and got engaged. My life hasn't been dramatic, but I've always considered it a stable and happy one.
Emily, I don't understand this.
Lately, my non-dramatic life has been troubled by this junior. Katrina, I told you about it yesterday.
But I can't do it somehow.
Please do it for me, Emily.
Katrina was a new employee just this year. While it's good that I was assigned as her trainer, she unfortunately has a poor memory.
I thought office work would be easier. I haven't done anything too challenging before.
Yeah, that's all right. It's all new for the newcomers, isn't it? Let's learn little by little. 3 months after I first comforted her. How many times have I heard the phrase, "I just can't do it"? You're young and cute, a line I was told over and over when I was a new employee. Katrina is indeed cute, and the youngest in our department. She's also very friendly, and all the male employees are smitten with her. That's fine. Being personable is good, and as a teacher, I prefer a cheerful attitude. But that's a separate issue from her work ethic. Katrina, at least try to take notes. If you don't understand something, it's okay to ask.
I don't bring anything to write on. It wasn't on the list of things to bring, and if I don't understand, I can just ask, right?
It feels like I'm dealing with an elementary school student. Well, maybe kids today don't take notes. When will I be freed from this newcomer? No matter how patiently I teach, it's pointless if she doesn't have the will to learn. My fiancé, Daniel, works in another department of the same company. We live together, so our conversations on the way home are often about my troubles with Katrina.
Emily is serious, huh? I could never teach someone. Patience just isn't my thing.
I think anyone would need a lot of patience to teach Katrina. My voice must have sounded particularly tired, because Daniel laughed and stroked my head.
I'll cook dinner tonight, so cheer up.
He may be indecisive and unreliable at times, but after listening to my troubles, he always gently pats my head. After complaining about her to Daniel, I felt I'd do my best tomorrow. Having a steadfast ally is a comforting thought, one that I realize every day. I thought that with Daniel, we could be happy through any changes in life.
I just heard from the manager. Are you dating Daniel?
One morning, as I arrived at work, Katrina suddenly asked me this. I guess I'll need to have a serious talk with the manager about handling personal information.
Lucky you. Daniel is like the sales ace, right? I was thinking, if I were to date someone in this company, Daniel would be my top choice.
She can't distinguish between what to say and what not to say. Would anyone talk about the possibility of dating someone right in front of their current partner? The discomfort I felt only grew with her next words. Did she notice the puzzled look on my face? Katerina smirked and said, "What's wrong, Emily? You look scared. Are you thinking I might steal Daniel from you?" Too surprised to utter a sound, she must have taken my silence as agreement. Her grin grew even wider.
Just because I'm young and cute, don't be wary of me. I wouldn't do something so unreasonable.
I already felt a lot of her insanity, but now her insanity seems to be beyond my limits. And although her attitude towards work is still negative, the usually unhelpful Katrina asked, "Emily, could you please explain this part to me?" I was briefly moved by this sudden enthusiasm. However, that moment was short-lived as she quickly reverted to her usual self, saying, "This is too hard for me. Can you do it, Emily? I'm going to the restroom," and left her seat. What was that all about? I felt foolish for even being momentarily impressed. When will I be free from this newcomer? The ride home with Daniel was usual, but today he seemed different.
Hey, don't be so hard on her. Emily, you're a bit too serious. She's probably just nervous because she's new. Maybe a more relaxed approach would make it easier for her to ask questions.
He said this with a bit of exasperation after I had complained about Katrina. I didn't expect Daniel to chide me, and I couldn't find an immediate response. Only managing a wry smile and a reluctant "you're right." But the chiding was just for that moment. Once we got home, Everything was back to normal. Maybe I complained too much. It must be depressing to hear it every day. I'll try to stop complaining. Daniel must have been tired and fed up with my constant complaints. I can't just rely on him every day. I need to support Daniel too. A few days later, when work had calmed down, I decided to cook dinner. I got ahead with my work from the morning, looked after Katrina as usual, and left for home feeling upbeat at the end of the work day. I had told Daniel that I would be getting home before him to prepare dinner. I will make his favorite meatloaf tonight, and he seemed really pleased, so he might come home early. After shopping and getting home, I finished the prep cooking and noticed a message on my phone. It's from Daniel. What could it be? Even before opening it, I had a bad feeling, which turned out to be right. The message said I had to work late unexpectedly. Apparently he's going to eat out, so we'll leave tonight's meatloaf for another day. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't disappointed, but it was work, so it couldn't be helped. Since I had already spent time making the meatloaf, I decided to save it for tomorrow night's dinner and order takeout for myself tonight. I wondered if it was a sudden call from a client. Overtime is common in his department, but sudden overtime is very rare. I thought I would make him a late night snack when he returned. However, Daniel didn't come home that night. It was very late, so I called him but couldn't get through. And even though I sent a message before going to bed, it was unread by morning. What should I do? Did something happen? An all-nighter at the office. Worried he might have fallen ill or something, I hurried and got ready a bit earlier than usual to go to the office. At the entrance of the company, I spotted a colleague from Daniel's apartment and rushed over. He looked puzzled when I asked if it had been busy yesterday. Daniel didn't come home. He said he had work, but
a client project, maybe. He left the office around the same time as me, around 6 p.m. Should we check?
Seeing my anxious face, the colleague suggested checking the attendance management system. But if even he felt it was unlikely Daniel was working late, I shouldn't drag him into this further. I gratefully declined and decided to quietly head to my desk for now. Sitting at my desk, I took a deep breath. The situation was starting to look grim. If he wasn't working, it meant he stayed out all night. Daniel never came home without notice before, so I wondered what he was up to. I noticed he had finally read my message, but there was no reply.
Good morning. Oh, Emily, you're early today. What's up?
Katrina greeted me at my desk, and I felt something off about her, but couldn't pinpoint what it was. Given her usual behavior, perhaps it wasn't surprising. I've got something on my mind.
You're really serious, and you?
That's when I realized what felt off. Katrina was wearing the same clothes as yesterday. My intuition was kicking in, the kind I desperately hoped would be wrong. I wished it was just a coincidence, but I knew from experience that such gut feelings rarely turn out to be mistaken. As if to prove my intuition right, Daniel called me after work to meet at a cafe near the office, where I found him and Katrina waiting for me together.
Emily, I thought you were a decent person. I've heard everything from Katrina. I'm glad I saw the truth before we get married.
In front of me, the words aimed at me sounded distant, like from another world.
It's not like that, Emily. Daniel is not at fault. I just wanted to get along with you and consulted Daniel about you. He was very understanding.
What exactly is not like that? Katrina, with tearful eyes and her hand on Daniel's arm, must have appeared young and innocent to anyone looking. And Daniel, not entirely displeased by this. Why did they call me here? Seeing him appear with Katrina in tow, I could guess what was coming, though I desperately hoped I was wrong.
Emily, you were harsh on Katrina, weren't you? Being too serious can come off as power harassment, you know.
That's quite a way to put it. But what are you basing that on? I admit I've had my hands full with Katrina, but I don't recall ever treating her harshly. As I began to speak, Katrina hid behind Daniel as if she were frightened.
I've seen how you two interact, Emily. You always complain to me about Katrina not being proactive at work, but I've seen her ask questions and work properly.
It clicked. Katrina had shown sudden enthusiasm in asking questions when Daniel was around.
Daniel, it's not Emily's fault. I'm the one who can't grasp the work, causing trouble.
No, it's better I say this for Emily's sake too. If a new person joins and goes through the same thing, it wouldn't be right.
Watching this farce unfold, I was overwhelmed with doubt and disappointment in Daniel. I didn't know what Katrina had told him, but his readiness to condemn me, his fiancé of 3 years, based on the words of someone he barely knew, was more disappointing than I expected. Was he always this narrow-minded?
Emily, let's break up. I think it's difficult to live with someone I can't respect as a person.
Yeah, I think so too. I blurted out an immediate response, and Daniel looked surprised. By the time he called me out, I had already braced myself for a breakup. While it wasn't devoid of sadness, the farce I had just witnessed had cooled my feelings considerably.
Emily, it wasn't intentional. Please don't hate me,
she said from behind Daniel's arm, her face twisting into a sneer I didn't miss. Regardless, I wouldn't react, and life would continue as usual. Heading home alone and spending time there, I felt a surge of melancholy, but I knew dwelling on it would mean defeat. The next day, as soon as I arrived at work, I was called in by the manager. It seemed that news of a broken engagement had spread. Though I had always found the manager to lack delicacy, he offered to reassign the training role to someone else. That meant the details about Katrina being the other party must also be widely known. It felt too soon, but I decided to just go with the flow. I accepted the offer, focusing on my work. The person assigned in my place was the senior who had trained me when I was new. Though I had stepped away from training Katrina, my team was very close-knit, and the atmosphere remained comfortable. They treated me as usual, not dwelling more than necessary on the recent broken engagement. The new project was quite significant, and upon handing it over, my senior told me, "I'm counting on you." Returning to the front line after a while, I struggled to keep up with the intense workload, but it reaffirmed my belief that it was indeed a fulfilling place to work. The busy life of coming home, having dinner, taking a shower, and collapsing into sleep distracted me from the slight loneliness of Daniel's absence. By the time we celebrated the project's success, the wound of the broken engagement felt almost non-existent. After the project concluded, I was surprised to be offered a promotion, which I gratefully accepted. The promotion was supported by the senior who had mentored me, and lately, listening to my grievances about Katrina after work had become a routine. I hadn't noticed while I was her trainer, but Katrina was popular among the male employees. However, on the other hand, she seemed to have a poor rapport with female employees, and combined with her attitude towards work, her reputation wasn't very good. Young women inevitably attract attention, and when someone uses it to their advantage, varying opinions are bound to arise. But I hoped she could find a better weapon than youth. As time went on, I expanded my role, and quickly a year passed, finding more fulfillment in my work than ever. Everyone noticed my increased engagement at work, so they were surprised when I greeted them with my resignation. The manager, whom I had thought lacked tact, expressed significant regret over my resignation, but I realized that he actually considered his employees. On my last day of work, just before leaving, teammates from the project that led to my promotion came to see me off with a bouquet of flowers. Though we are now on different teams, we still maintain our friendship and go out for drinks regularly. Creating such unbreakable bonds is truly valuable, a sentiment that deeply resonated with me, especially after the broken engagement.
Emily, I'm going to miss you. Why didn't you tell me about your resignation earlier?
As we were enjoying a warm and friendly atmosphere, an uninvited guest made an appearance. Everyone clearly had a "why are you here" expression on their faces.
The other day, at the morning meeting, the manager informed us.
The senior smiled and gave Katrina a pointed warning.
I've wanted to apologize to you for so long after what happened.
I instinctively exchanged looks with the other members around me.
I'm really sorry about what happened with Daniel. I just had to apologize before you left. I never imagined it would drive you to resign.
Likely trying to assert some kind of superiority, believing I was leaving due to lingering feelings for Daniel. Her triumph was evident in her smile, convinced of her narrative.
What? You're talking about Daniel, Katrina. There's no way Emily is still hung up on him. You're overestimating his importance. It wasn't some grand romance, right, Emily?
The senior smirked and said to me. This was clearly a face trying to vent the frustration that had built up over time towards Katrina.
Really? So you don't have to quit, right? I want to work more with you, Emily.
With a forced smile, she said something she didn't mean, and everyone here probably wanted to put her in her place. Nudging me with her elbow, the senior urged, "Go on, say it. I would like to keep working, but you know, a lot has happened in a year."
What? You still have feelings for him?
The words and facial expressions don't match, and Katrina was sure I still had feelings for him.
If such a wonderful man asked me to marry him and stay by his side forever, of course I'd follow him.
Instantly, her smug expression turned to one of suspicion.
What? Marriage?
You didn't know, Emily is retiring because she's getting married, and he's cool, well-educated, and well-paid.
Why did the senior seem more pleased than I was? I nearly laughed, managing only a composed smile instead. Katrina, who had been basking in a sense of superiority, now glared at me.
Oh, were you matchmaking? Why didn't you tell me? I introduced you someone. But I'm glad for you, Emily. Tell me how you got that guy.
She was desperately trying to regain the upper hand, but this topic was a pitfall for her.
It was love at first sight at another company's party. He pursued Emily aggressively. No wonder. He's got good taste. He's a startup president after all.
The words dropped by the senior, as if saying now is the time, seemed to be enough to silence Katrina. The comparison between Daniel and the startup president was starkly different. In this setting, there was no one to coddle her or lift her up just because she was young. Until I left, she stood there awkwardly, occasionally giving me resentful glances. And a month after resigning, my partner and I hastily got married, planning to travel abroad a week later for his new job.
Going to miss you. Make sure to keep in touch, okay? Let's all get together for drinks when you're back.
The senior treated me to lunch as a farewell party. The conversation was no longer about Katrina, but about a very capable employee who had recently joined the company. This young and charming new employee, who is not only skilled, but also has a good personality, quickly overshadowed Katrina, who had been the center of attention until then. It seems things aren't going well with Daniel either, and now she appears to be working somewhat uncomfortably, feeling out of place.
Well, it's karma, isn't it? No one in our department feels sorry for her. but we're not abandoning her. So Emily, don't worry and just do your best in your new environment.
That's the cool thing about my senior. I am surrounded by wonderful people. Even Katrina serves as a kind of cautionary example among them. I hope she finds a turning point in her life that changes everything for the better. Now, I can sincerely think that way.
I came to realize this at the recent dinner party. What matters most in food isn't just the taste, but also when, where, and with whom you eat that matters. Mike's mother, Linda, glared at me and spat out her words.
"We don't need you here. Get lost, you poor thing."
That's exactly what I wanted. I no longer want to be with these people. I tried to save face for an acquaintance, but I've had enough. All right, got it. Excuse me, but before I go, I signaled the waitress, and soon someone important showed up. He was the person in charge of this high-end restaurant. His expression was stern. I briefly explained the situation.
"Your bill comes to $30,000.
Mike and his family were disappointed, but we remained calm. We were determined to drag this family down to rock bottom. That's all I had left in my heart. My name is Amy. I'm 30 years old. I work in the kitchen of an Italian restaurant. My dream is to own my own restaurant. To achieve that, I work hard every day and night. I got interested in cooking because my father, Andy, runs a restaurant. His cooking is highly praised by many customers. I want to have my own place and showcase my skills like my father. I've had this dream since I was very young and have been working towards it. I decided to keep some distance from my family to stand on my own. My father praised my decision without hesitation.
That's very brave. I'll support you, Amy. But if things get tough, come to me right away. I'll always be there to help, no matter what."
His restaurant is also used for gatherings of big company presidents. Recently, one of those presidents, Kevin, who runs a trading company, had a request. His company's manager's son was looking for a girlfriend, and he asked if I'd meet him. Since it was a request from a regular customer, I couldn't refuse, so I decided to meet him. Mike was a decent-looking trading company employee, but he had issues in his personality. I remember thinking he wasn't my type when I first met him.
Hey, how many guys do you know who'd pick you up in a fancy car on the first date?
I don't know. Maybe no one else.
Where should we go? Actually, I already planned our date. Come on, get in.
Mike loved bragging about his wealth. Everything he wore and drove was a designer good. He listed all the benefits of dating him.
If you go out with me, you'll never have to worry about money. My dad is a manager at a big trading company, and I work there too. Soon, I'll get promoted and lead a team.
He talked nonstop about himself. I was overwhelmed. I couldn't believe there were men like him. Back in culinary school, the men around me were all dedicated. We recognized each other as rivals and worked hard to improve, surrounded by cool guys. But what about Mike? He had nothing impressive to show for himself yet kept bragging. All he was saying was that his family was wealthy. I was so fed up that my attitude naturally turned cold. But Mike was thrilled by it and told me that I was a type he never met before. Eventually, we agreed to meet again on another day. A few weeks later, on the day of our second date, I found myself dealing with an unexpected person. Mike's sister, Karen, showed up and started sizing me up.
Hi there. I asked my brother if I could tag along. Want to know why? To learn about my future sister-in-law. Of course, I want to know what kind of person you are.
Maybe so. Nice to meet you. By this point, I was completely turned off. I couldn't believe I had to go on a date with his sister. Mike seemed unfazed, but was this normal for him? In short, Karen was a nasty woman. She looked down on my appearance and behavior, asserting her superiority. Basically, she was just like Mike. She was also the type person who feels good by belittling others.
Amy, what brand is that outfit? I think I'm pretty knowledgeable about clothes, but I've never seen it before.
This is handmade. A friend of mine is really good at it, so sometimes we make things together from scratch.
Handmade? No way. Are you poor, Amy?
Hey now, Karen. Don't say it like that. Amy's dad is a chef. and I've heard he's quite skilled. I don't know where he works though.
Isn't it some downtown shop?
Karen said that and laughed. I had no idea what was so funny. Even in downtown shops, there are plenty of chefs who serve excellent dishes. Clearly, Mike and Karen's values and way of thinking were completely different from mine. It's true that I wasn't dressed up in anything special. I knew I wasn't dressed up or wearing brand name clothes. I lived modestly. But that's because I'm self-sufficient and saving for my goal. I didn't want to be looked down on by someone living off their parents without working. Did I enjoy that date? No way. Absolutely not. The only ones having fun were the nasty siblings who kept belittling me. Kevin, who introduced me to Mike, was one of the investors in my dad's restaurant. So, ending my relationship with Mike required some preparation. I didn't want Kevin to think I was a stuck-up woman by turning Mike down for a flimsy reason. One day, Mike invited me to his parents' house. He had gotten some rare ingredients and wanted to show me.
Amy, you said you wanted to own a restaurant, right? You might be interested in these rare ingredients.
Thanks, I'll take you up on that. On the day, I visited Mike's parents' house and was dismayed. The house was ostentatiously decorated, reflecting their nouveau-rich taste. However, the ingredients Linda had sourced were indeed rare and intriguing. Wow! Hawaiian sea asparagus, Brazilian biquinho peppers, Italian erba stella.
That's right. Impressive, huh? Whenever we get rare items like these, the neighbors flock to see them.
Linda's attitude was even worse than Mike and Karen's. She was addicted to flaunting her wealth, and everything she said and did annoyed me. Moreover, based on what she heard about me, she completely treated me like a poor person.
If you want, I can give you some of these ingredients.
Thanks.
You'd be happy to save a little on food costs, right? Though I can't really understand that feeling. Helping poor people feels so good.
Linda continued, leaving me stunned. What kind of life leads someone to be so arrogant? However, Linda's husband, John, had an even worse attitude. He lounged around like some kind of lord, acting as if he owned the place. On top of that, he was quite lecherous, openly staring at my chest and backside. Linda, Mike, and Karen all seemed to notice but didn't say anything. It appeared John completely controlled his family with money.
So, you want to own your restaurant one day. Your dad is a chef and owns a place, right? Don't you want to take over?
I have no interest in my dad's restaurant. I want to own my place.
You should just take over your parent place. Why go through unnecessary hardships? As a chef, why don't you cook something?
As John requested, I found myself in the kitchen. I was using those rare ingredients. I had never seen some of those before. I somehow managed to create a few satisfactory dishes. The four of them began eating without saying grace. John nodded.
Not bad. It's pretty good.
Considering it's her first time using these ingredients, it's impressive, don't you think?
It's just average. Anyone could do it.
Well, we could keep her as a housemaid.
They all laughed loudly. Did I come here just to be insulted? John, Linda, Mike, and Karen were beyond my comprehension. I decided to complain to Kevin about all these unpleasant experiences to end the relationship smoothly. As they laughed, I made up my mind. That's what happened. They're really awful people, right? That night, I returned to my parents' house for the first time in a while. I wanted to tell my father about my interactions with Mike and his family. My dad looked completely taken aback. He crossed his arms and groaned.
We have all kinds of regulars, but I've never met anyone who brags about their wealth like that.
Me neither. I can't continue this relationship, and marriage is out of the question. I absolutely don't want to marry him. But Kevin introduced me to Mike.
Are you saying it's hard to refuse? Are you worried about the impact on our restaurant? If that's the case, don't worry about it, Amy. My restaurant will be fine. There's no need for my daughter to worry about anything. What's more important is your happiness.
My dad's words blew away my doubts.
By the way, Mike's dad, John, has been to our restaurant before.
Really? Did he just forget?
Probably. You should bring him to the restaurant sometime. And if you continue the relationship, it's important to thoroughly assess him.
Following my dad's advice, I decided to investigate Mike thoroughly. I looked into his education, career, and social connections, things I had previously ignored. As a result, I discovered some shocking truths about Mike and his family. There was no way I could tie my life to these people. So, I decided to end the relationship definitively at some point. The opportunity came a few days later. Mike asked me to arrange a dinner party. From the way he talked, it seemed he intended to propose to me in front of his family. I don't know what he liked about me, but frankly, it was a huge nuisance. Still, it was a good opportunity. I decided to end the relationship in front of his family. I booked the restaurant as instructed, prepared thoroughly, and waited for the day.
This restaurant is not bad, especially for those on a budget.
This place is sometimes used for company dinners. The food is excellent. Karen, eat more.
I wanted Italian. Amy, you really have no sense, do you?
Come on, Karen. You said you didn't care where we went, remember?
Mike and his family seemed to be having a great time. He was drunk and finally mentioned our engagement. He said he liked me and wanted to make me his wife. I immediately stopped him. There was no way I was getting engaged. I'm sorry, but I have no intention of getting engaged. I came here to end our relationship.
What? What are you saying all of a sudden?
Linda's expression changed at my words. She seemed angry that her son, Mike, was being dumped right in front of her. She laughed sarcastically and told me that I had no right to choose.
A rude and ignorant person like you? We don't need you. Go home, poor girl.
What matters most in food isn't just the taste, but also when, where, and with whom you eat that matters. This dinner party made me realize that deeply. Go home, gladly. I no longer wanted to be with these people. All right, got it. Excuse me, but before I go, I signaled the waitress, and someone soon came over. He was the person in charge of this high-end restaurant. His expression was stern. I briefly explained the situation.
The bill is $30,000.
What? $30,000? What the hell is this? Who do you think you are?
This is my father, Andy.
What?
Mike and his family were speechless. They didn't expect my father to be working at such a high-end restaurant. In this restaurant, my father is the head chef, and my mother manages the entire business. Karen treated me like a poor person, but my family is much more respectable than Mike's. It only seemed like I wasn't wealthy because I was trying to achieve my dreams on my own. My father gave a brief introduction, but his eyes were clearly filled with hostility.
I was curious about the man my daughter was dating, so I did some investigating. Mike, you seem to be quite a terrible person.
What? What are you talking about?
You're currently cheating, aren't you? You're involved with 2 other women besides my daughter.
Mike fell silent. Actually, my father and I had hired a private investigator to look into Mike and his family. The results were disastrous. There was no way I could tie my life to these people.
So, why don't you be honest? Maybe your family didn't even know.
Mike, is it true? Mom, did you know?
I didn't know. How about you, John?
Well, actually, I did know. He came to me for advice. I told him to be careful, but Mike...
It turns out that Mike had once gotten a woman he dated pregnant. At that time, he secretly consulted John, who urged the woman to have an abortion. Mike didn't take responsibility himself and let John pay her off to settle the matter. When I mentioned this, Linda and Karen's eyes widened in shock.
Did you force her to have an abortion? Seriously?
You made her do that? Why didn't you tell us? You idiot.
Sorry, but I thought you'd both be mad if I told you.
Of course we'd be mad. What do you think life is? Unbelievable.
Karen berated Mike, but she wasn't in a position to criticize others. My father and I also pointed out Karen's faults. Her behavior was quite appalling too.
Karen, can you really criticize your brother? You've been playing around with multiple guys, haven't you? Unfortunately, they all seem to be just nightlife friends.
Nightlife. Karen, are you still involved in that? Hand over the credit card right now. I won't allow this anymore.
What? No way. How am I supposed to pay without the card?
Karen was unemployed and had no intention of working. She planned to keep living off her parents. From my perspective, it is unbelievable that I am focused on self-reliance. My father didn't spare any mercy on Karen either.
Karen, you need to have more self-discipline. Do you know what your nightlife friends call you behind your back? I'm sure you don't.
What? I don't know. What do they call me?
They call you Sugar Mommy.
That's a lie. I don't believe it.
Unfortunately, it's true. The hosts call Karen Sugar Mommy because she's chubby and spends a lot of money. Our private investigator found this out thoroughly, so there's no mistake. Alex, Michael, Daniel.
Hey, those are.
The names of your nightlife friends. They all call you Money Pig. Maybe you should check next time you go to the club.
No, stop it. I don't believe you. They all care about me. They wouldn't say such things. I won't believe it.
Karen's eyes were bloodshot. Linda hugged and comforted her distressed daughter. Linda looked regretful.
Nightlife isn't worth it. Relationships bought with money never last. Didn't I tell you to build genuine connections with people?
Excuse me, but it seems you also haven't built proper relationships with those around you, Linda.
What? That's not true. I've done nothing wrong. Stop making baseless accusations.
It's not an accusation. It's based on thorough investigation. You can't criticize your children either.
Linda considered herself a community leader, but in reality, she was disliked by her neighbors. Apparently, she was completely unaware of this. Her face showed utter disbelief. How clueless could she be?
You're always bragging, just like your children. Your neighbors seem to think so too. Have you really never realized it until now?
But that can't be true. During community cleanups, at neighborhood meetings, everyone is always friendly. We even have tea parties.
Those tea parties are very unpopular. You might want to cut back. The neighbors all say they'd rather not go anymore.
Stop it. Don't make things up.
Linda was just like Karen. She didn't want to accept the truth. Mrs. Smith, Mrs. Johnson, Mrs. Davis, Mrs. Clark, and Mrs. Brown. I listed the names of Linda's acquaintances who had cooperated with the investigation. Linda's face twisted in shock. She might have felt betrayed.
It's a lie. We're all friends.
That's just on the surface. Behind your back, they all call you an obnoxious, bragging rich lady.
Maintaining relationships with neighbors is hard. You must have gone too far. You should have known better. You bragged too much, didn't you?
Linda broke down in tears. She didn't respond at all. The people she thought were her friends, but actually they weren't. She seemed deeply shocked by this and looked dejected. John spat out.
You're all just a bunch of fools, and all useless. I've told you to get it together. How can you let a few words get to you?
He was still acting like the head of the family. He seemed to think he was the pillar supporting this extravagant spendthrift family. Even now, John was proud. He acted as if his family's shortcomings had nothing to do with him. He seemed to take pride in supporting his spoiled, spendthrift family. Maybe that pride is what made him so arrogant. But even John was in no position to criticize his family.
You act like you've done nothing wrong, but that's not true, is it? You're the one who should be most blamed here, John.
What? What did I do? I've done nothing shameful to anyone.
It's bold of you to say that, especially when you harass the waitresses every time you come here.
What?
Under my father's glare, John immediately shrank. He clearly knew what he had done. The other three were bewildered. My father was right. John harassed the waitresses whenever he visited. He touched their bodies, sniffed their hair, and tried to hug them against their will.
You probably don't know how many complaints we've received from the waitresses. Some even quit because of you.
I'm sorry.
John, what did you do to the waitresses here? Tell the truth.
He touched them, tried to pay for favors, and caused them a lot of emotional distress.
Linda, Mike, and Karen were all stunned. They were shocked to learn the truth about the head of their family. My father didn't ease up on his pursuit.
If you like, we can show you the video footage capturing the moment you harassed the waitresses. The security cameras recorded you pushing them down.
Wait, please don't. I was drunk. I'm truly sorry.
The $30,000 I mentioned earlier includes compensation for the waitresses. I hope you'll consider it positively.
Yes, I understand. I'm very sorry.
Mike and his family were in shambles. They must have wished they hadn't come. Their cheerful demeanor at the beginning of the meal was completely gone. But my father and I had no intention of letting them off so easily. You've mocked me enough. If you think it ends here, you're dead wrong. I will tell Kevin everything, like the results of this investigation and the insults you hurled at me. Be prepared.
To Kevin? No, please. That would be a disaster. Please, anything but that.
Yes, I'm sure it would be a problem for you, but I have to fulfill my obligation. I need to explain to Kevin why I rejected Mike.
I'll call the president myself. Amy, you don't need to do anything. Please.
John was vigorously nodding in agreement with Mike. They had too many secrets they didn't want to be revealed. What a disgraceful family. My father let out a big sigh. No wonder. We knew an even bigger secret about John. Something just as unforgivable as his harassment of the waitresses happened.
John, you should just come clean and pay for your crimes. It's for your sake and your family's.
What crimes?
Don't play dumb. It's useless to hide. Our excellent private investigators uncovered everything. You've been collecting money through illegal means, haven't you? John's face turned pale. He didn't expect us to know that much. The investigators my father hired were thorough. There was no doubt that John had committed crimes. His accomplice was a department manager from a related company. The two colluded to inflate invoices and had been lining their pockets for years.
Just the other day, that department manager came here for dinner. When confronted, he confessed everything.
What? That guy. He never said anything to me.
It was just the other day, and I made sure he wouldn't tell you. You've been overcharging for quite a long time, haven't you? I wonder how much damage you've caused the company.
Kevin will surely be furious when he finds out. John began to shake uncontrollably. He was probably imagining what would happen if the president found out. If the truth came out, John would definitely face consequences. He wouldn't remain a department manager. He might even get fired. Actually, he'd almost certainly be fired. And then the family's end would come. They'd likely be sued for damages. The amount would be unimaginable.
I'm very sorry. I beg you, please.
Suddenly, John apologized deeply to my father and me. He was hoping to gain our forgiveness and save himself. How pathetic. It made me feel sick. John was unaware of my disgust, and he forced the other three to apologize deeply as well. This disgraceful family kept apologizing deeply.
I'm sorry for the rude things we said to your daughter. I'll scold my wife and children. So please, forgive us.
Forgive you? What do you mean? Are you asking us not to report this to Kevin?
Yes, that would be helpful.
You must be joking. Are you asking us to become accomplices in your crimes? That's beyond unreasonable. Mike pleaded with me, Amy. He seemed to want to remind me of our relationship, but I ignored him completely. Listening to anything Mike had to say was pointless. The best thing was to give him no attention at all. You treated me like a poor person with your arrogant attitude. You were saying you'd keep me as a maid. I haven't forgotten the humiliation of that day.
We didn't know anything at the time. If we had known you were the daughter of such a prestigious restaurant owner.
And if you had known, then what? Would you have changed your attitude? I can't agree with judging people based on their status. It disgusts me.
Amy, I'm really sorry. I've reflected on my actions. I won't call you a maid or a poor person again. I want to start over. I'll devote myself to you. So please.
Mike's words didn't resonate with me at all. They were obviously just saying those to get out of this situation. Mike never stopped his family from mocking me. Sometimes he even joined in. Marrying him. The thought repulsed me. There was no way I'd do that.
Now that I know about your crimes, I have a duty to report them. Of course, I'll also inform Kevin.
John, you better prepare yourself.
That's all I have to say. Now, would you all please leave? I have a lot of calls to make.
Wait, please, I beg you. I'll give you money. Anything you want.
John's tearful face was pathetic. It was revolting to see. He knew that if his crimes were exposed, he would be finished, and he understood that all too well. Linda, Mike, and Karen all looked lost and helpless.
Enough. Stop being so stubborn. I can call the police right now.
I'm sorry. Please forgive me.
John didn't move until my father yelled at him. He paid the full bill and apologized again in shame. Poor John, and the foolish family that relied entirely on his money. The four of them trudged away, looking like condemned souls headed for hell. Afterward, my father informed the president, Kevin, about John. Kevin was furious and had John confess the facts at an executive meeting. My father also reported it to the police, leading to an investigation of the company. As a result, John was arrested for embezzlement. The department manager who colluded with him was also arrested. They had been overcharging for 15 years. Some employees were amazed it hadn't come to light sooner. The damages were significant, amounting to tens of thousands of dollars. John cried when he received the demand for compensation. With the family's breadwinner gone, Mike and Karen could no longer spend freely. The damage to Mike, who worked at the same company, was immense. After his father was arrested, he couldn't bear the shame and resigned. Karen couldn't repay the money she borrowed and had to sell her branded goods. It wasn't enough, and without her parents' credit cards, she borrowed money from loan sharks. She now works part-time, barely sleeping, to pay off her debt. I hope she realizes this is the price for her reckless lifestyle. Linda, as the wife of a criminal, lives in shame. She couldn't greet her neighbors or go out shopping anymore. It was surprising to me that even she could feel shame. John suffered the most financially. In addition to the company's compensation, he had to pay $30,000 to the waitresses he harassed. 2 waitresses were victims of John's harassment. Sadly, one of them suffered emotional trauma and still receives psychiatric treatment. John's crimes are serious. He needs to reflect deeply on his actions. As John got arrested, Mike and his family began a downward spiral. About a year later, they sold their big, boastful house and land and moved far away. A few years later, I finally achieved my dream and opened my own restaurant. I started managing a creative cuisine restaurant that uses seasonal ingredients. Thanks to everyone's support, the restaurant is thriving. Sales increase steadily every month. This success is thanks to my excellent staff and the management consultant my father recommended. In fact, I have a good personal relationship with this consultant. In the future, I want to focus not only on the growth of the restaurant, but also on the fulfillment of my own life, which I have neglected. I plan to live in a way that ensures my happiness, so my father won't have to worry.